All right, good evening. It is 6 o'clock. I'll call our regularly scheduled board meeting to order. And we will start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's welcome our Mill Creek Student Council. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you so much. If you all wouldn't mind, would you go around to the podium and introduce yourselves to us?
And this is the Mill Creek Student Council.
Good afternoon. My name is Max Coleman. I'm in 6th grade, and I am one co-president of the Mill Creek Student Council.
I'm Elliot Thompson. Thank you. I'm the other co-president, and I'm in 6th grade.
I'm Jane Qualls. I'm in 6th grade, and I'm the vice president of the Mill Creek Student Council.
My name is Roy, and I'm the secretary of the Mill Creek Student Council, and I'm in 6th grade.
My name is Violet, and I'm in 3rd grade, and I am a classroom representative.
My name is Molly, and I am a classroom representative, and I'm in 2nd grade.
My name is Annie. I'm in 5th grade, and I'm a classroom rep too.
Hi, I'm Nikki Lindberg. I am a 4th grade teacher at Mill Creek, and I am one of the sponsors of Student Council.
Hi everyone, my name's Logan Eilert. I'm also one of the sponsors and a 1st grade teacher at Mill Creek.
Thank you all so much for being here and taking the time out to lead us in the pledge. You're welcome to stay or go home and do homework. Pass, yeah. All right. So I will seek a motion to adopt our agenda.
So move, Goodburn.
Thank you. Second. All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We have several minutes to approve, items 1.4 to 1.9. Unless anybody has changes, I will seek a motion to approve those those 6 board minutes.
So move, Borgman.
Thank you. Second? Second, Ashley. All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Dr. Hubbard, 2.1 Superintendent's Report.
Yeah, so I'd like to begin with congratulating the Shawnee Mission West robotics team. They recently earned the first place trophy at the West KC Metro First Tech Challenge League tournament. They earned the championship title after competing with 28 teams and will now advance to the regionals. Their sponsors are Tyler Youthen and Jay Sharbut. We're rooting for all of our robotics competitors as the season continues. Now is a great time for students to apply for this year's Next Great Idea competition. Students are encouraged to think of a problem they would like to solve and present a strategy to solve it. It would be a new app, invention, business plan, or an idea for a way to address a community need. This April, they'll have the chance to present their innovative ideas before a panel of judges for a chance to win prize money. This is all part of the district's R&D Forum, one of the district's biggest celebrations of innovation and achievement. The deadline to apply is March the 3rd. The R&D Forum will also feature a student showcase highlighting artwork and projects students have created throughout the year. We encourage the entire community to plan to attend the Student Showcase from 4 to 7 p.m. on April the 25th through the 27th at the Center for Academic Achievement. The Next Great Idea competition will take place on April the 29th. This is our 61st year of holding the R&D Forum, and we'd like to thank the Rainier family who has supported the events ever since the beginning. I want to thank Team 1 Shawnee Mission for supporting Special Olympics Kansas at the local Polar Plunge a couple of weekends ago. They braved below freezing temperatures to take a dip in Lake Olathe. This team was honored with a plaque for being the team with the most participants. They also raised more than $3,000 to support Special Olympics athletes. Students, families, and staff across our district benefit from opportunities created through Special Olympics. One example is Unified Sports, an opportunity that joins students of all abilities on the same team for competition experiences. We want to congratulate the 23 students who have been named finalists in the Arts Council of Johnson County Shooting Star Awards program. They were nominated by their art teachers and are being considered for scholarships for their work in the itinerary, performing, and visual arts. We'll include a link in the recap to a full list of the finalists this year. We also congratulate the Shawnee Mission West High School Aurora Choir and the Shawnee Mission West High School Chorale, who were selected to perform at the 2023 Kansas Music Educators Association in-service workshop this past weekend. More than 60 students were also selected to perform in honor groups at the statewide event. We'll include a link in the recap so we can celebrate all who represented the Shawnee Mission School District at this statewide music conference. A group of Shawnee Mission North students took first place for a video production at the Kansas Business Professionals of America state competition. Seniors Wilson Boyd, Jason Culp, and Ted Collier submitted a video about the black-footed ferret. Now they are advancing to the national BPA competition. We formed a classified salary schedule work group to review and revise all classified salary schedules in order to be competitive with surrounding areas, both inside and outside of education. The work group is finalizing their recommendations, and we will be presenting them to the Board of Education at the March 20th meeting. The proposed salary schedule would be effective July 1, 2023. We're excited to share this salary schedule with you at the next meeting. And at this time, I'd like to invite Chris Lash to the podium as he will be introducing our first Shawnee Mission All-Star of the evening.
Good evening. I want to begin by thanking Dr. Hubbard and the Board of Education for allowing members of our community to nominate staff members to be recognized. As you know, we have an amazing all-star team in the Shawnee Mission School District, and it's my honor to introduce one of those amazing staff members, Patricia Wild, who is an English language learner aide at Briarwood Elementary School. Patricia was born in Quito, Ecuador. In high school, she studied English and was familiar with English, but not yet truly bilingual. Patricia met her husband, Stephen, who is an American citizen from California, who was working in Ecuador. They have 3 children, Anna Marie, Jonathan, and Michael. In the summer of 1990, Patricia and her family moved to Kansas City because of her husband's job. In 2002, Patricia applied for and was hired as an ELL aide at Briarwood Elementary School. 12 years ago, Patricia became an American citizen, swore the oath of allegiance at a beautiful ceremony in Fort Scott, Kansas. Patricia's story gives her a unique perspective and allows her to connect quickly with students and families who are moving to the United States. Just a week ago, I saw this in action as she gave a new family a tour of Briarwood. Patricia is one of those people whose positive attitude is contagious, and students and staff look forward to working with her. We are now ready to watch the video.
Okay, now we are ready. Let's go.
A big example of her is when COVID hit, she took a year off for that. And yet her families, they kept texting her with questions and things that they needed to know. And she still, on her own personal time, was sending all that information to me, to us, so that we could help and we could get answers back to them. That's just the kind of selfless person she is. She just 100% goes out of the way. She'll do whatever it takes, and she always just makes it better.
Reading is essentially like language comprehension and decoding, so I feel like before students can learn to read, they have to have that language piece, and that's where Miss Wild kind of fills in the gap between, like their home language and English.
I've been reading, and then every time I get stuck on one, she helps me. And then in the end, she tells me to read it again so I can remember, and I can read it to my mom.
She's really fun to play with because she has a lot of things planned.
She's learning me like coins, days of the week.
I think one of the sweetest things Mrs. Wild does is she makes it her mission that every child know a parent phone number. And that's huge. And there's so many children that don't know that.
Mrs. Wild is Briarwood. I can only imagine that Mrs. Wild knows exactly what those kids are going through as far as an ELL child coming into the States, coming into Briarwood. And for those kids to know that there is someone there who has their back and who has been through that is just awesome.
Congratulations, Miss Wild, you're the best teacher.
Patricia, I just want to say thank you for all you do for our students and staff and families. You're an amazing person who's had a huge impact on all the students you have worked with and continue to work with. Thank you for making Briarwood an amazing place to teach and learn.
Good evening. It's an honor to me to receive this special award tonight, and after watching that video, my heart is full of gratitude. I want to thank Mr. Chris Lash, my coworkers, and my students. I love my job, my students, my friends at Briarwood. Working in Briarwood for the past 20 years has been a great journey for me, and I'm grateful to be part of the Shawnee Mission School District and part of a great team at Briarwood. Thank you.
Congratulations, Patricia, and thank you, Mr. Lash. Now I would like to invite Dave Ewers to the podium to introduce our next Shawnee Mission All-Star.
Thank you, Dr. Hubbard and members of the Board of Education for this great opportunity for the Shawnee Mission North community. Tonight, I am lucky enough to introduce one of our outstanding staff members, Emily Dorothy, who is a social worker in our building. Emily is Shawnee Mission through and through. She spent her entire educational career as an SMSD student, graduated from Shawnee Mission Northwest, and has spent most of her career in our district. Emily is joined here tonight by her husband, Doug, and their two children, Isabel and Colin. Emily has 18 years of experience in Shawnee Mission and has been at SMN full-time since 2014. Prior to being named principal, I was an associate principal at Shawnee Mission North from 2016 to 2021. During that time, Emily and I worked together daily with many of the same students. I was able to see firsthand Emily's compassion and professionalism when working with students. It is an absolute joy to work with Emily, and she is a gift to our school. Please join me in watching this video production featuring our All-Star, Emily Dorothy.
Miss Dorothy, the All-Star.
Mrs. Dorothy does so much for our school, so much for our community. I've said this before, she's literally saved kids' lives with her professionalism, with her ability to help students and reach them on a level to get them to understand how valuable they are to our school, our community.
I'm very thankful and proud to be her colleague. From the social emotional aspect, brings so many things that maybe sometimes as a classroom teacher I haven't always thought of from that perspective.
There have been some times where students have either come to school in a crisis or just dealing with different things in their personal lives in addition to school. And most of the time, the check-in is all the student needs. They just need somebody there. Sometimes they want more than an administrator, and I understand that. And that's what Mrs. Dorothy is great at, is being just a great support and making those relationships with our students so that they feel comfortable and safe and happy to be here at Shawnee Mission North.
I sit and talk to her about things that I really can't talk to anybody else about, and it actually has helped a lot. She just brings light out in people's days. Like, she's always there.
She knows how to make you feel better. She knows how to make you feel like you have worth.
We clicked, and I've recommended so many students to her because of the way that she just talks to you, and she just makes you feel like an actual person. She's just real. She keeps it real. And I love how real she keeps it.
She's a social worker. She's the one that other social workers reach out to when they have questions or thoughts or concerns about things. We're in the relationship business, and so having someone who is willing to take the time to listen, to really think through situations with a student is a vital part of the school system, and Emily Dorothy is one of the very best.
Thank you so much for recognizing me tonight. It feels pretty strange to be recognized independently for the work I'm doing at Shawnee Mission North, because I feel like we work so closely as a team. I don't feel like I'm doing anything on my own. I'm so lucky to be a part of the amazing social work community in our district, and part of the incredible community of Shawnee Mission North. It is an incredibly special place, and I feel very, very lucky to be a part of that community, and very, very lucky to be a part of the students' and families' journeys while they are there. And I also want to thank all of you. This has been a really wonderful district to work for, and I've been here for a really long time, and you have consistently supported mental health and social emotional support in our schools, and I'm so grateful to be a part of that as well. So thank you.
Congratulations, Emily, and thank you, Mr. Ewers. And that concludes my superintendent report.
Thank you. And congratulations to our all-star winners. I believe before we go to board reports, do we have some students in the house, some government students with us tonight? If you are, can you mind raising your hand? All right. Welcome to school board meeting. Glad to have you here. Do we need to sign any forms or just take a picture? No. Glad you're here. Okay, board reports. I am going to just look down the aisle here and see. I'm going to begin with Ms. Boyd-Nerona. Do you have any updates on SMAC PTA?
No official updates, but just a reminder for their clothing exchange, the calendar that they're alternating Mondays and mornings and evenings, and Thursdays and Fridays. Located still at the Early Childhood Center, around the back at door 7, still open for donations for students of the district that we serve, but their families as well.
All right, thank you. Ms. Owsley, do you have an update for the Education Foundation?
I do, and a brief opportunity for folks. The Education Foundation's Dolly Parton Imagination Library has been a smashing success, with an enormous amount of families in the community signing up to receive the books for their students. And as folks know, those are for kids who aren't even with the district yet. So these are the little ones who are learning how to read, and they get a book a month. And so we are looking for folks to provide matching contributions for the Imagination Library so we can keep up with the unprecedented demand. It was quite a bit more families that signed up than anybody told us that we could, so SMSD really knocked it out of the park. And if you want to, you can go online to the Foundation's website and you can make a contribution to the Imagination Library. There's a drop down in the donations that they know that it goes to that. So thanks for everyone for signing up. All those kids are going to be coming into their kindergarten year with a library full of books already, and so that's really a tribute to our families for participating.
Great, thank you. All right, next, Mr. Stratton, do you have an update on KASB Board of Directors activities?
I do, thank you. This coming weekend, the KASB Board of Directors is meeting. This time the meeting will take place in Emporia, Kansas, and that is the home district of the current board president, Art Gutierrez. And so there'll be 2 days of meetings, one to tour the Emporia School District, and then the second day for meetings. And then in about a month, a group of us will be attending the National School Board Association gathering. So that's coming up on the calendar too. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Owsley, back to you. Anything on the KASB Legislative Committee?
So we create our legislative platform prior to the session starting, and so there really isn't anything new to update on that one. But Dr. Little is here tonight to give us a report on all of the things that we care about happening in Topeka, which is a lot. So we should all pay attention to that.
Okay, that's right. And I think nominating committee is the same, right? And so that would be Policy Review Committee, Ms. Goodburn.
Yes, on your agenda tonight, you'll see the 5 policies that are second reads. I believe they are 7.02 through 7.06, so we'll handle those later in the meeting.
Okay. Any other board updates? I think we're good there. Okay. All right, thank you for that. All right, so that brings us to discussion items 3.1, legislative update. Dr. Hubbard.
2.03?
Oh, wait, what did I miss? Oh, sorry, yeah. Skipping right ahead. Apologies, Mr. Knapp.
So board financial report, you'll see attached the monthly board financial report for January 2023, ESER 2 and ESER 3.
All right, so I am going to look and see if anybody has questions. Okay, all right, thank you for that information and those financial updates. All right, now, item 3.1.
So I believe we have Dr. Little joining us for a legislative update.
Good evening. Stuart Little with Little Government Relations in Topeka. Happy to be here tonight. I wanted to, as we're at the midpoint of the legislative session, thank Dr. Hubbard and the administrative staff for assistance getting through this session so far. I'll give you a bit of context in where we are. This is the week of the midpoint of the regular session. They will light schedule this week, 2 days of meetings. They will come back for 3 weeks of work, 1 week of negotiating resolution of bills, and then 1 week on the floor, and they're done, the 6th of April. So things are moving quickly. There are a tremendous number of issues unresolved in public education. And I'll hit a few of those, but kind of what's going on. If you're kind of following along in the papers, there's lots of tax policy moving along. A flat tax has passed a committee. The repeal of the sales tax that was passed 2 years ago. The Senate just passed a bill that accelerates that to implement that on January 1 of next year. So it speeds it up. The downside of that, it takes the authority away from your local counties and cities to determine whether or not they want to take the sales tax off. So there's a lot of those tax policies coming through and a variety of other topics. But in the world of K-12 education, we had at the end of the session, end of the first half of the regular session, the Senate passed their kind of version of the enhanced education scholarship bill, Senate Bill 83, that expanded and grew the scholarship program, which is the tax credit that's used, that has existed for about 5 years here. And that was kind of, in general, their big effort during the last week. The House made the decision, which we have seen happen now for at least 3 years running, have made the decision to not work and debate and pass right now a lot of policy bills because the K-12 education budget is still out there. That has not been resolved. The entire state budget hasn't been resolved. That's going to get wrapped up in the next 2 weeks, and then we'll have a budget bill. And what they're going to do again, and this is because the House K-12 Education Budget Committee has the authority to do this, they will combine the K-12 budget along with policy issues and bundle those together. And you will recall when I've come back and when we've seen how things have transpired over the course of time, you'll put together some bills. The governor will veto some. Some will pass because there'll be enough of 2 or 3 things in it that'll make folks vote for it. And that's exactly what we're lining up to see happen again this year. I would note that there are, in the House side, some of the most significant issues, and they kind of go pro and con. Their education savings account bill, House Bill 2218, is sitting and waiting to be dealt with along with the budget. The House's version of expanding the education scholarships 2048 is going to be connected in with the budget. They also have a couple of other policy issues. Two of them, one of them is allowing non-resident students that are the children of staff and teachers to attend school and not have to participate in the lottery, because we're going to have the open enrollment starting next year. And so the students of staff and teachers their children would automatically be admitted into the school district. So those things are all floating around on the House side. They're going to try to put some good things and bad things. For some reason, there's a belief that House Bill 2261, which will allow school board members to be compensated, is going to be a real a draw maybe to try to pick up some votes. So just to let you guys know that that's on the table. But what's a couple things that are not there and are significant, that part of this discussion. Number one is that there's no action or conversation about special education funding. That's not been, there have been some briefings and some of the hearings that the House committee held and conversations. Now, it's kind of incorrect to call them hearings. There have been informational briefings from the State Department and those kind of things. There's not been anybody bringing forward the discussion of adding the funds. There's not been as well. There were two bills that addressed the sunset of the high density at risk, which expires at the end of this year. So then when we get to school year 24-25, the high density at risk law will have expired if nothing happens between now and then. And so those are two issues that are still out there and aren't addressed in the budget. And the question is, will either of these be addressed in the budget process? You could address the special education as you're putting the budget together. The high density at risk, the two bills that were introduced are dead. They're not moving forward. Everything that isn't advancing is dead and doesn't proceed until they can be back next year. But the high density at risk could be addressed within the budget. We've done that before, had a budget proviso put into the budget bill that says, kind of notwithstanding what the law says, we're going to keep doing high density at risk. So those are the issues that are sitting there on the House K-12 side. That historically has been the chamber that's put a lot of these bills together. The Senate Education Committee's done a lot of policy issues, but the budget just kind of sits over there. There's a budget committee over there, but they're not quite as engaged as the House committee. So there will be a package of education bills that will include education savings accounts, expansion of the scholarships, and a variety of those other policy bills. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, they'll be combined and attempt to run those before 3 weeks from now, by the time we get done working on bills and committees. You'll have a written report from me that will include a variety of the bills that are still alive, a list of some of the key bills we were following that are dead. But I'm happy to answer questions about any of the specific legislation or any other issues that may be on your mind.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's been a busy session.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to look up and down the aisles here. Does anybody want to jump in? Mr. Stratton?
Thanks for being here. You mentioned the special ed. A couple weeks ago, there was a move to create a committee of some kind. This is Brad speaking now. It sounded like a kick the can down the road committee. Is that what's now been in place so that it won't be addressed this year, but maybe next year?
That is one of the bills that was blessed and is kept alive, so it's on the list of things that can be put into a package at some point. And it is. We had a special committee on a committee on special education 5 or 6 years ago that was comprised of representatives of special education directors, and it was a very broad. There must have been 25 people on that task force that looked into the topic. This is very narrowly focused. Other than the State Department of Education having a couple of appointments, this will be political leadership in the House and Senate that will make the appointments to this task force, and will then come back and bring recommendations. You kicking the can down the road is one way to describe it. That's also how you set up some policy that you may want to spend some extra time studying and not have to deal with it in the current session. So I suspect that task force will be a part of what is put together as a final piece of legislation.
All right. Ms. Housley?
So what happens if everything gets bundled into this giant bill, a budget bill that has all the policy in it, and it has things in there like the expansion of the education tax credit vouchers? If the governor were to veto that, does the entirety of it then get vetoed at one time?
In the state of Kansas, the governor has a line item veto authority. So part of legislation can be primarily and historically budget related, can be line item vetoed and removed from the budget. And that has happened in the past, sometimes a lot more than it does these days, but that is part of it. On policy issues, it is unusual, but not unprecedented to line item some policy questions. It's been done in the past, but it's not common. So in general, I think the way things are going is that it would require vetoing the entire policy portion of line item. Vetoes could be made specifically in there, but it would usually be for policy issues, all or nothing.
Just to follow that through, so if the bill, the budget bill, is vetoed because it has the voucher expansion in it, then do they have to re-meet to rework the budget?
So in the event that there was a piece of legislation that included the budget bill and was sent to the governor, it likely would be done before they leave on April 6th at the end of the regular session, because you kind of want to have the budget wrapped up, unless you don't, which depends on the circumstances. But if it were to be vetoed, then there's the veto wrap-up session that'll start, I believe, the 24th or 25th of April, where they'll come back and there'll be another opportunity to pass a budget. And one thing to keep in mind, this is part strategically why it's done, it's not the entire state budget. It's just going to be the K-12 budget that's going to be tied up with these policy issues. So everything else in the state can get resolved, and then the only thing would be left would be K-12, which enhances the pressure on lawmakers to make a vote, but it also provides a tremendous amount of authority to make some statements and veto things sometimes.
Can I ask one more follow-up for clarification?
Sure.
So last year, I think the budget bill last year included, because typically the budgets for K through 12 are like 2-year budgets. And so last year was an extension. There was like an extension on there. Am I recalling that correctly? To get us through into another year. So if this budget were to be vetoed, are we still, like, if things go south and things are being worked out, is there still funding for K through 12, or what happens with that?
Yes, the veto last year included the 2 fiscal years, so going out, and part of that was done because this was the first step into having the COLA added in, and so that was something that folks wanted to get into the school funding formula and moving into that next step where we go as we got done in addressing the inflation issues. So if the budget bill goes away or is vetoed, it would, other than things that are adjustments in the current fiscal year that are in FY23, which is the current fiscal year, there would be, that would be impacted, but I don't know that it would cover 24, 25.
The core budget
right.
was passed last year.
Right.
So this year it's like the odds and ends budget, if that makes sense. It's not the core, like with the COLA included. Or not the COLA, but the cost of living increase, or the, not CPI, CPI.
Yes,
sorry,
it is added in there. Yeah, so yeah, and I'm sorry if I was unclear about that. They did pass 2 years last year, so going forward, that's still in there. But it's going to be anything that were adjustments to that, and I believe the COLA was added in last year. I'll check for sure and make them.
Thank you, Dr.
Get
Little.
back.
Okay. Ms. Borgman.
Thanks, Dr. Little. Nice to see you. Can you talk about House Bill 2218 and its potential impact on public education dollars?
This is 2218 is the Education Savings Account Bill, which is essentially, and we've all been paying a lot of attention to this. This is a piece. This is a bill that would make essentially any student that's eligible to attend a public school have the ability to secure a voucher, or a tax credit, not a tax credit, but a voucher to use, get a payment equal to the base per pupil that would have then for a student. And then it's targeted at a poverty level in the first year, and the way it ended up coming out of committee was, I believe it's 125%. I apologize, I don't know off the top of my head, but there's a threshold that then increases over 4 years, and this was done in committee. It initially started as a one-year bill. They amended it in committee, so they've essentially expanded it to over 4 years. The federal poverty level for eligibility in the fourth year would be at 400% of poverty, and I believe there would be 8,000 of these incentives offered to folks who wanted to take it. So you'd have 2, 4, 6, 8 over 4 years expanding. Then after that, there would be no poverty cap, and there would be no limit on the number of folks that would be eligible. So this is essentially kind of in 4 years, it would be pretty wide open. You can take the base state aid where you want.
Okay, and so, and you may not know the answer to this, but for a non-public school is not required to accept all students. Is that correct?
We've had lots of hearings on these bills over the last few years, and kind of the general consensus has been that maybe not by everyone, but the consensus of folks engaged in the conversation is that those are flexibilities that non-public education programs have and utilize. Yes.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So if this passes, do we have any sort of idea whether this will pass the House?
That's always an interesting question, because then we get talking into about what happens in a veto and those kind of things. This, just in general conversation with policymakers in the State House, this is a pretty big deal. And the original fiscal note on the original bill was $150 million. And I don't recall seeing what the revised fiscal note on when you just take the entire cap off 4 years from now, what it would be, but it's also going to be expensive. This is a pretty profound change. A lot of people are watching and listening to what's happening in other states that are having these same conversations or have gone through those conversations. It is also a high-profile point of distinction between political parties that is useful for some, and so that's part of what's all factored in here. I think it would be surprising to get to the end of the legislative session and have this be passed and signed by the governor or passed over her veto. So,
okay.
Not to diminish the significance of what's happening here, because one can never know what's going to happen, but there's a lot of barriers to getting something this big over the finish line.
Mm-hmm. So do you mind if I just clarify, Dr. Sinclair?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yep.
So just to ask a clarifying question, so I make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So basically, if this should pass and the governor, should not veto it, then what I understand, what I'm hearing you say, is that so for the first 4 years, students there's a poverty rate that's included in this voucher,
right.
Correct? And then after 4 years, it would be sort of an open door for any student to receive a voucher, poverty not included, correct?
Well, yeah, when you get to the last year, it's 400% and 8,000 students.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And then also, just to piggyback off of that, non-public schools at this point have the capacity to allow or deny a student from entering their school, correct? Sorry, yeah, did I say non? Yeah, non-public school. A non-public school has the ability to either green light or red light a student from going to school there,
Yes,
correct?
and one of the things in the hearings that we've had on these bills is it's clearly seen, you can see enrollment forms and choices and options that are presented to folks that where they have to make some designations, and it has an impact on decisions made in non-public schools, yes.
Yeah, a good thing for us all to keep an eye on.
Can I
Thank you.
just add one more thing to the end of what Jamie's comment was?
Yeah.
Just one more thing, because Stuart said the first year fiscal note was 150 million, and that's with the poverty framing in there. And just FYI, the funding for special education that we're needing is also 150 million, what we're schools across the state of Kansas are being shortchanged on. So I just find that interesting.
Appreciate that.
It's all very interesting.
Anybody else? I'm going to have a couple.
I know that on our platform, there was information about open enrollment, that we wanted some changes to happen with that program that's supposed to happen. Have we seen any movement on that, or any?
He mentioned that briefly. We really are advocating for our employees' children to be not part of the lottery system, so they would have first availability along with current transfers siblings. And right now, the employees' children are still not included in the law. There has been a lot of conversation about that, but I'm still optimistic. Dr. Stewart, are you still optimistic?
Yeah, I think that will be in a bill that will include things that some of our folks may not want to vote on. So that's how this will be put together. And that is Dr. Hubbard's exactly right. That's one of the issues that came forward as legislation. And so I think it will be part of something in a final resolution. Some of the other things that are more important than that, but have a higher financial cost are, we haven't done anything or had any conversation with folks up there about the impact on special education and the movement of decision-making by folks in an open enrollment situation, and what that might mean on a financial impact, maybe going any number of ways in the future. It's one of those situations where I think there's a finite amount of energy, and there are 25 bills alive, and some of them bigger than we've ever seen. And I think this may have just been kind of sitting for a little bit to be dealt with.
Thank you.
Okay, I think most of my questions were hit, except for maybe one. So, but before I move on, so this bill about the open enrollment fix, that was mashed up with a pretty cumbersome Parent Bill of Rights, open portal reporting requirement that many school boards and superintendents and educators testified on last year. Is that correct?
Right.
So it's adding that reporting requirement back in?
When they passed it out of committee, the House K-12 Education Budget Committee inserted a provision that added, maybe redundantly, another parent portal so that folks could have access to information. And I think it's also tied up to objectionable material and identifying some of that kind of issues that we've wrestled with for a couple of years. So even that bill is not necessarily cleanly focused on the things that we've been talking about.
Okay. So, all right, so clean funding bill, we've talked about that is not likely, but that would be preferable, clean funding bill, so it's not all mashed up. The special education study, I mean, that study could go ahead, but the point is, if you want to study, keep studying, but let's not delay the funding. Is that kind of the position of how you would interpret the Shawnee Mission legislative platform in relation to that study?
Oh, sure, absolutely, right? Yeah.
Okay. And the Senate Bill 83, that tax credit scholarship expansion, that's essentially diverting public funds to pay for private school system tuition. So that, again, is in conflict with our legislative platform, right? Okay. So I guess the only other one that you'd mentioned was the compensation for school board members. That seems to be rising to the top. And that, if you could help me understand, are there funds attached to that from the state to fund, or is that out of district dollars? So you would be asking school board members to take that out of the general fund or something?
Yeah, this was a very brief hearing. There weren't a lot of folks that showed up to testify on this, and it was, I'm not sure why it's still on the list of things that are alive, but yeah, there's no dollars attached. One of the members of the committee said that it just would be symbolic of thank you to have some payment for serving on the board, and that it was not a vigorously discussed or debated issue, but it's still alive.
I just don't see a lot of school board members taking money out of classrooms to do a stipend.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so my last question was about the education savings account, Bill. That's been blessed, right? So that's not considered a dead bill. And so just in terms of dollar amount, is that like, could be like 270 million in new dollars or something really like almost double what would be required to fully fund special education if that education savings account bill were enacted and all private, non-public school families claimed that tax credit for the savings account if they kind of capitalized on that.
If I get your question, yes, it is going to be expensive. It's going to be much more expensive than $150 million just in the first year, yeah.
Right. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you very much for reporting. There were some good news bills in there that didn't quite make it through, but maybe next year.
Yeah, true.
Thank you, Dr. Little.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to 3.2, the Shawnee Mission Kansas Evaluation Systems Assessment 5-year report. Did I get that acronym right?
It's Kansas Education System Accreditation.
Accreditation, there we go.
So this is the system that allows our schools to be accredited, and it is typically a 5-year cycle. This is actually year 6 of a 5-year cycle for us due to 2021. We had a COVID pause that we took advantage of, and we mostly took advantage of it for the ability to closer align the KISA 5-year cycle with our strategic planning cycle, because we really kept doing our strategic plan work and our KISA work during that time, but we were trying to get them closer aligned, which will be great for us moving forward. But our final review for the KISA accreditation process will be on March the 9th, and we have an outside visiting team with 4 members from across the state. And before Kim starts, I would just like to take a minute to thank our KISA district leadership team for their commitment to this process. They spent a lot of time after school and working on committees, and we have a lot of teachers and administrators that work through that process. So just a big thanks to that team. But most importantly, big thanks to Kim Barney, who is the most amazing KISA chair anybody could ever ask for. And not only do we say that, but she also, I believe, is the chair for the Blue Valley School District for their outside visiting team, and they also sing her praises. So thank you, Kim, for, this report is meticulous, and Kim does such an amazing work with all of our reporting, which is the work that really nobody wants to do behind the scenes. So we're appreciative that Kim is very willing to do that work for us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hubbard. I appreciate those comments and that support. And I am very fortunate and happy to be here tonight to share an update with you. And so this is one of the first requirements that we have to meet before we apply for accreditation. The state requires that we inform our local board of the existence of the report and provide an update at a public meeting. So that's really kind of the formal part of why I'm here, but more importantly, I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about the process along the way. So our objectives this evening is I'm hoping by the time I'm done, you have a better understanding of the KISA accreditation process and that you have information around the procedures and timeline. And then I'm happy to answer any questions about either the accreditation process or the KISA report itself that was submitted. So this is our slide that we always start all of our KISA DLT meetings with, reminding our team, and as Dr. Hubbard said, those folks are important to this process and have done a lot of outstanding work, and their commitment throughout the 5, which really was 6-year cycle, has been outstanding. But we always start reminding them that everything we do anchors back to our strategic plan objectives. So KISA is not separate from the strategic plan. KISA is the accountability measure that we have to, the external accountability measures that we have to make sure we meet to ensure that we're ready for the accreditation. So this slide kind of highlights the elements of KISA. So KISA is a growth process that really supports continuous improvement. It is a state process, and it has moved to a systems approach. So prior to 5, now 6 years ago, the state used to accredit individual schools. Now we are accredited as a district. So they do look at schools and they do look at school data, but it's under the umbrella of the district. Compliance and foundations are a very important part of the KISA process. Compliance simply means we've got to make sure that we meet all state and federal requirements, and the foundational structures are making sure that we are supporting what they have deemed best practices to support education. The stakeholder involvement is another big key piece that they look at, and so we've been able to tie in all the stakeholder involvement that's been part of our strategic plan in the development, but as well as the implementation. And that also includes the work of the KISA district leadership team, as well as our individual building leadership teams that are meeting on school level, school improvement processes, and then also our district and building site councils are part of that. And then, of course, also the strategic plan committees and action committees that work together over the course of this 5-year cycle have been part of that as well. And then lastly, Dr. Hubbard kind of mentioned that importance of that outside validation team, but that's the external review where people come from outside the district in and they engage with our stakeholders and make sure that we're actually doing what we say we're doing. It's just one thing to write a nice, pretty report, but can people speak to it? Is it really impacting students? Do teachers have what they need? That's what they're checking on, and so that is a really important part, and that happens annually, and we're getting ready to have our 5-year report on March 9th. So this slide kind of highlights some of the things I've already mentioned, but a couple things I want to make sure you understand here is it is a 5-year improvement cycle. We are in year 5, and we are applying for accreditation this year. And mainly just what I kind of already alluded to, the role that KISA plays is really that external accountability. And that happens through 3 different things. We have an annual report that we submit every year. You have seen the year 5 report, which is the most comprehensive, which makes sense because you're reflecting on progress, the district's progress over the entire cycle. Then the yearly external review that is happening by our OVT team coming in and visiting and making sure that we're actually doing what we say that we're doing, and then the ongoing monitoring and reporting of data. So if you remember back, we did have a needs assessment process in year 1, which was 6 years ago, and this board members, if you were on the board at that time, you I think even participated in the initial part where we had what the state called with the R rubrics, and we had the dots, and we went around and identified our greatest needs, and we created a process that then our building principals replicated with their staff. All of that data was combined together, and the KISA district leadership team analyzed that data, and through that process identified the 2 R areas that we were going to focus on, and those are relationships and responsive culture. Under those 2 headings, you see several things that are very intricate to our strategic plan and just things that the Shawnee Mission School District is about, and so we've organized that way. And then the 3rd R is results, and we know that we are all held accountable, and we are here because we need good, positive results for our students, and so those align directly with our KISA goals. So the next steps as far as what have we been trying to accomplish during this last year of the 5-year cycle, we've continued implementing the strategies outlined in the strategic plan, continuing to collect data and monitor progress, and we've continued to engage our stakeholders. But the big things really that make it different about being in year 5 is there's a whole different level of analysis that happens, and looking in those results and documenting that progress, and then finalizing all the required documentation that then ultimately gets sent to the state and then eventually to the Accreditation Review Council to be part of that accreditation review process. And then, as we've already mentioned, we have the big visit coming up in less than 2 weeks now. In the report, this slide kind of highlights the different sections. So the Tell Your Story is really the first thing that the OVT read when I submitted the report to them. It's the first thing that the accreditation review cycle will read. And so it's really things that you want to make sure that we share that are unique about the Shawnee Mission School District. And then we're required to report progress on strengths that we've witnessed over the course of the 5-year cycle, as well as challenges. So you guys have seen the report, but some of the strengths that I think are worth mentioning is just the commitment across the board at all levels of the organization to the implementation of the strategic plan. The close alignment between the continuous improvement process that we're facilitating at the district and how our buildings anchor to that, so the alignment between the building level improvement process, our stakeholder engagement, and then our focus on learning. Some of the challenges that I think are not unique to any district across the state, and probably not even to the country, are the impact that we have had, or the pandemic has had, on student learning, but also on the social emotional needs and supports for both students and staff over time. And then we're coming out of some of that. We're able to have more learning-focused conversations, which is exciting. But there was a time when we were doing everything we could, but we still had to make sure our staff and our students were safe during the pandemic. And so that took some of the time and attention away from what we would typically be doing as a school district or as a building individual level school. And so there are ramifications from that. And so my role in that process of the report was just to be honest about telling them, this is what we went through, and we're seeing that we're coming out of it, but it's real, and it has impact results, and it has impacted a lot of things. Another challenge, as you guys are well aware of, is the labor shortage, and again, not probably unique to our district, but just finding people for all the different positions has been challenging, and I don't think that's even unique to education. It's across our labor market, but a school, the people in a school district are so important that that's been a challenge. So we just want to make sure that they understand those things before they even get in and dig into our data and all the other things there. The foundational structures, I kind of already alluded to that. Those are the best practices, and they're listed there, but I just want to point out a few that are very, very important part of our strategic plan. So our response to intervention, or RTI, our work with DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and then our focus on post-secondary and career preparation as we push forward with making sure our students have multiple avenues to earn those market value assets. Then we're required to provide a summary of the progress on our KISA goals, and we have 4 goals, and you see those in the report. There are 2 social-emotional goals. One, focusing on interpersonal skills that are needed for college and career readiness, as outlined in our strategic plan objective. And we use the Panorama self-management survey data to monitor progress on that one. And then personal resilience is the second one. So we look at the GRIT survey data and are tracking students' perceptions of how well they are doing in those 2 areas. And then we also have 2 academic goals, one being college and career readiness, which really we're looking at performance on state assessments in English, language arts, and math, and we're working to increase our percent of students at earning a 2, 3, and 4. Obviously wanting more students in 3 and 4 than 2, but even moving students from 1 to 2 is progress. And then our second academic goal is student growth in general. So it's more about looking at some of our local assessments like Acadians and MAP and making sure that our students are demonstrating growth in ELA and math, and we look at that very carefully. While I'm talking about all this data, I want to give a plug to Dr. Dan Gruman, who's in the house, because he's been awesome at pulling that data for me and putting up with all my questions and, hey, I need this, and can we do it this way, and whatever. So while I appreciate Dr. Hubbard's comments of support, I also have a partner in crime that I want to make sure is recognized as well. Additionally, we need to report progress on state board outcomes, and so those are listed there. Kindergarten readiness is important, social emotional learning. IPS stands for individual plan of studies, and then they look at our high school graduation rate and our post-secondary success data. And then tied very closely to some of those things is we need to show how we're supporting all students achieving the skills that are outlined in the definition of the state's definition of a successful high school graduate, which is very closely aligned to the district's portrait of a graduate and the work that was done there by that strategic plan committee. And then I've already talked about stakeholder engagement, but they make sure that multiple times they ask to make sure that we're engaging stakeholders. And then lastly, the last 2 are really about making sure we have a sustainability plan. So we went through this process, but can we sustain the things that work? Do we have a plan of what we would keep? Do we have a plan for what we might need to abandon because it's not gaining the results that we want, or that we just don't have the capacity, those kinds of things. And then lastly, identifying next steps as we transition into the next 5-year cycle. So here's a little bit more information about that outside visiting team, or the OVT team. Their role is to come in and engage with our stakeholders, and our stakeholders' role is to explain our data and to share our progress on goals, and then also seek feedback from the OVT on ways that we can continue to grow and improve. We're also charged with providing evidence of compliance, results, and process, and so that's why there's so many links in the report, because a lot of those documents are really the evidence of the things that are happening behind the scenes across the district to show the work that is happening at the district and in the individual schools. And then lastly, we have to make sure that we're ensuring that there's accountability for both results and fidelity to the continuous improvement process. So here's a list of our current OVT team members, and Jana Craig Hare is actually, I want to recognize and show some appreciation for her. She was on our team in years 1 and 2, and then she took a break mid-cycle. Unfortunately, our previous chair was unable to continue to serve in that role, and we found out, maybe 4 weeks? 6 weeks maybe before the visit, caused a little bit of alarm. And so we reached out to Jana, and she graciously agreed to come back and to serve as our chair. And to be a chair, you have to have special training. So while we have some great members that have been with us and they're listed there throughout the cycle, none of them were trained chairs. And I did not want to say, hey, I know you're busy, and I know we're asking you a lot just to come and be on our team, but now I need you to go get the training so you can chair. And so we were really, really, really grateful that Jana was able to step in. But you can see from the other 3 that are listed there, they've been with us the entire time. We appreciate their commitment, and they bring a wealth of experience from multiple districts and multiple jobs and perspectives, both in K-12 public ed, but also higher education as well. And then, as Dr. Hubbard said, our OVT is scheduled for the Thursday, March 9th. When we talk about accreditation, there's really 3 components that the state looks at, or the ARC actually is the one that will look at it, and that is that federal and state compliance. Are we meeting in good standing? Are we following the laws and in good standing? And then do we have evidence of student performance and growth, which is all about our results? And then do we have a quality growth process, which must include goal setting, action plans, and monitoring of progress? And then additionally, there are 3 different definitions. So when a district applies for accreditation, they will eventually receive one of these 3 designations. Accredited means there's evidence of both process and results, and the district is in compliance. So you have to have all 3 of those components I just mentioned to be fully accredited, or what they call accredited. Conditionally accredited means there's insufficient evidence of either the process or the results or growth in the results, and the district still must be in compliance to be conditionally accredited. Not accredited, if you're not compliant, if you don't meet the compliance requirements, you're going to get not accredited. Additionally, there could be insufficient evidence of process and results, or you're not in compliance to receive that designation. The link at the bottom of this slide takes you to the accreditation criteria rubric that the Accreditation Review Council, referred to as the ARC, will actually use, and they use this with all districts when they review all of our documentation. So if you haven't checked that out, that shows you exactly what they're looking for, and I used that. I really tried to map what was on there when I was pulling things in for that report and submitting the different artifacts and documents to show, because you see the word of evidence a lot in these slides. That's because they're wanting to know, can you back up what you're saying? Do you have proof that you're doing what you're saying? So now I'm going to move in quickly to just the process. The first 2 items here are really just about the process that happens across all 5 years, but then under the year 5, it gets a little more intense as you're applying for that accreditation. So the system completes the requirements to apply for accreditation, which includes submitting our year 5 report and then conducting the visit that's happening on March 9th. The OVT team then provides additional documentation through their OVT report that then is submitted to the Accreditation Review Council, or that ARC committee, and then the ARC will review our report, all the artifacts that I uploaded, all of the data that we include in the report, plus just all the data that is available at the state on the state report card, things like that, and then that OVT report. And using that rubric that I just referenced, they look at all of those things, And based on that, they make the accreditation recommendation to the Kansas State Board. And then the State Board is actually the body that will award the accreditation designation for the district. And as a reminder, that could be accredited, conditionally accredited, or not accredited. This slide just shows the timeline. So in February, so the system report is due 30 days before the OVT visit. The OVT visit was scheduled for March 9th, which meant our report was due early February. That was submitted to the state through the online KISA application and was also shared with our OVT team, so our outside visiting team. On March 9th, we'll have our visit. During that time, we will have stakeholders at, district administrators, building principals, teachers, support staff, and even some students coming in to speak to, kind of summarize the work that has happened over the course of the 5 years. We are going to really try to be brief in our, because they have a pretty comprehensive report to look at. We don't want to spend a lot of time talking at them. We want to give them an overview of, and share the lens through students and teachers. So like, what's it really look like at the building? The district can say we're doing this, but what is that? How does that translate at the building level? And then we really want the OVT team to have time to ask probing questions and dig deeper and get anything they need clarified so that they have no doubts on what they're going to put in the OVT report that will go to that ARC committee for review. And then the OVT report is actually due to the state 30 days from the OVT visit. So no later than about April 9th, we will have our OVT report back, and it will be submitted to the state. And once it's submitted to the state, one of the tasks I had to do early in the year was let them know when our OVT visit was so they could get us on the in the queue for the ARC to review and then on the docket for when it would go to the state board. And so April and May, the ARC will review all the documentation, including the OVT report and our report and then all of our data and artifacts. And that will happen April and May. And then by early June, the ARC will submit their accreditation recommendation to the Kansas State Board of Education for review. And then in July, it will actually be on the Kansas State Board of Education as an action item to award the accreditation designation. So you can see it takes quite a while from when we submit things in February before we're going to really know officially what our accreditation designation will be. So, we'll have a pretty good idea based on the information that the OVT shares, but as far as really knowing what it is, it's pretty timely and pretty intense. So then what does this mean for next steps? Once we get through that OVT visit, what happens next? We move into a new cycle. The new cycle would be 2023 through 2028. Part of that process would be conducting a new needs assessment process. It will look different than what we did last time. I'll be working with a lot of folks in this room and other staff members to figure out how do we want to engage our stakeholders in that review process to identify our needs and our priorities. And we'll want to make sure that whatever we're doing provides feedback for the board and the district to consider as they look at reviewing and revising that strategic plan. Because right now we have a 1-year gap. We're finishing our 5-year cycle now. There's 1 more year next year on our current strategic plan. So we want to make sure that we stay in alignment with that. And my goal has always been, don't ever get out too far ahead of your skis. Stay in line so that we're not doing 2 different things or we're not having to change things. So that will continue. And then part of that will be after we've had our stakeholders participate in the needs assessment process, then we will identify goals. Some of them may be similar goals to what we have now. I think there will be conversations around how are we measuring those goals? Do we need different targets by level? Do we need to have different ways to measure some of the things? But I think there'll be some continuity into our next cycle around the things that we're focusing on. But I anticipate how we collect and how we measure it probably will change because we've learned a lot going through it this time around. And then obviously we continue to engage in that continuous improvement process that's kind of outlined in that graphic there. With that, do you have any questions about the process or the report?
Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The comprehensive work that goes on behind the scenes to bring this report to this stage is, I'm sure, hard to convey, but thank you.
Thank you.
Recognize the hours and hours and hours and days and days.
There's a lot.
A lot. A lot. Okay, I'm going to look up and down here to see if we have questions. Yes, Ms. Borgman.
Thank you, Ms. Barney. And I remember when this process started, even before I was on the school board, I sat in a room with you and Dr. Ziegler, and we unpacked a lot of this. And so it's fun to see this come almost full circle. So congratulations on just your great work. And thank you for really digging in, especially through some bumpy years, as well as Dr. Ziegler as well, and Dr. Grumman. So I just have a question with regards to when we see the reports, when we get the reports back. And first, I mean, accreditation is everything, right, to a district. I mean, it is so big work, big time work. When we get the reports back, how transparent are the results? Will they say, hey, you guys really excelled in this area, and in this area there's some opportunities for growth? I mean, what kind of transparency will we receive from this analysis?
So from the OVT team, we definitely will receive, commendations for things that we've done well, as well as suggestions for improvement or things to consider, especially as we move into the next cycle. At the state level, if we would be unfortunate enough not to be fully accredited, I believe, and I haven't seen it because I can only see what's online, they sometimes give some directives, which hopefully we don't have any of that. So the level of specificity will depend, from the state anyway, will depend on what is decided around that status, if that makes sense. So as long as we're accredited, or maybe even conditionally, but I know if you're not accredited, they're like, you must do X, Y, Z. So that would be very transparent. I don't anticipate any of that, though.
So it sounds like from the OVT, they get pretty granular, but from the state level, it's just like green light, red light.
For the hopefully, because you just want that green light at that point.
Well, it's going to be green light, green light, green light.
Yeah, but yes, there is a specific question on the OVT report. Dr. Hubbard mentioned that I do serve on Blue Valley's OVT team as their chair, and one of the advantages of doing that is they're moving into year 2. I can go in through my login through Blue Valley, and I can actually see the OVT report and what our team that's coming in is asked to report on. So I can stay ahead of so I know there's an actual question that says, what are the strengths of the system and what are areas. So they have to be pretty granular with the feedback they give us, because the ARC's going to look at that. That's probably one of the most powerful things the ARC's going to see in that OVT report. I will also tell you that in talking with Jana, our OVT chair, she anticipates getting a draft of the OVT report back to us in about 2 weeks or so after the visit, maybe a little bit longer because spring break's in there, but she recognizes they just went through this process themselves, and she understands the timeline and all the things that I already explained. So we will actually get a chance to review it prior to her submitting it. So if there's anything that we want clarified or we think isn't accurate, we have an opportunity. Now, if there's something that is missing, then we would have to live with that. But there is an opportunity to be collaborative in that as well. So we'll see it before it's actually officially submitted, which is nice.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Embry?
Yeah, thank you so much. I am curious, just for my own sort of illustrative example here, can you remind me for our last CASA visit what kind of feedback we got from the OVT and sort of how that's showing up in this latest report?
Absolutely. One of the questions we had to address is how do we take feedback from the OVT? So they had a lot of positive feedback from our Year 4 report, and some of those strengths that they identified were the same things I put in our Year 5 report, where the commitment to the strategic plan, close alignment, building and district, stakeholder engagement, those kinds of things. One of their things for us to consider was how to and we actually put this in our Year 4 report, asking for feedback from them, knowing that partially due to the pandemic and partially just due to it's difficult, finding ways to engage our students in a relevant way with the individual plan of study or the IPS has been challenging. That has been challenging for us. It's been challenging for districts across the state. And so in the Year 4 report, they put in, find ways to make it more relevant, continue to work to connect what they put in their plan with their course enrollment. And so part of that is directly related to, it's partially because they gave us feedback, it's also partially because we were ready and had the capacity to start moving forward utilizing Zello more. We currently use our Zello platform for our IPS. And so students at the high school level were using the course planner to map out their course plan for the duration of their high school career based on their inventory data and stuff from both U-Science and Zello. And so that was a new piece that was added in just this year based on that feedback. Now, it's a little bit, we asked for it, so we were kind of wanting to do it anyway, but that was the other couple other things they mentioned were making sure, and it was just a reminder that we continue, we do a great job of engaging stakeholders, but make sure that we are always mindful of making sure that we're engaging all stakeholders and that our stakeholder committees and makeups reflect the diversity that we celebrate and respect and want to continue. So it wasn't a criticism, it's just more of a, hey, as you continue to work, keep this on your radar, because sometimes that can get out of balance for a variety of reasons, and just be cognizant of that.
Thank you. Mr. Stratton?
A couple of questions, and the first one is historical reference. So across the state, are the districts divided into 5 cycles? So there's 5 cycles going, or did everyone start at the exact same time and everybody end? We're all cycle 5.
That's a great question. So when they started 6 years ago, which is because we took that pause, districts had the opportunity to go in where they felt comfortable. So we had some, across the state, there's some districts that went in at year 5 and they started over after that first year. We had some districts go in at year 3. So I said Blue Valley is in year 2. They went in at a later year than year 1. When Shawnee Mission, when we decided we wanted to go in at year 1, because if you remember, that was when we had Dr. Southwick here as our interim superintendent. And a unique factor here is we've had 3 superintendents during the 6-year process, and we've had 3 now OVT chairs. So that's kind of unique to our system. But because we knew the leadership was going to be changing, we wanted to, again, start at the very most basic level, knowing that we were going to be doing some strategic planning work and getting that vision from our new leadership. So we made the decision to start at year 1. But the state let people enter where they felt comfortable. From this point on, we're on a 5-year rotation, and that won't change. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I remembered it, but it was kind of a blur. The other part has to do with what you referenced around the strategic plan. We seem to be about at the same cycle, 5-year KISA cycle, getting ready to do 5-year strategic plan cycle.
Yep.
How did you see over these past 5 years one influencing the other?
As I said, it was very integrated, and the strategic plan was our guiding compass and continues to be. And so that I see will be, again, we have to make sure, my role is to make sure we are meeting all the requirements and dotting our I's and crossing our T's, and that when we get to year 5, there's no surprises. But the work is really going to come from whatever comes out of that new strategic plan. So even though we will do a needs assessment next year, and the strategic plan might not be renewed until a year later, we have the opportunity as a district to go back in and say, okay, based on where we are in our strategic plan, we need to make some adjustments to our goals. We need to make some adjustments to, so we will continue the process of staying in line with that strategic plan. So to me, although we a KISA process, the accreditation process is important, the strategic plan trumps it, and we follow in line with that, because that is carrying out our vision. So really, anything that we do in KISA is what is happening now with the strategic plan. We just have to do a few extra things that are documentation-wise and outside, involving external reviews and things like that for that accreditation.
Great, thank you. Because I could see that some districts might do the opposite and say, we're going to look at KISA and generate the strategic plan around that.
Nope.
And I'm very proud that we're doing it the other way.
It starts that way, and then we follow along and make sure that if whatever's needed at the state, that is covered.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
That was a good question. Thank you. Anyone else this way? From a board perspective, how would you characterize like the role? And I don't know, this might be more Dr. Hubbard. Just trying to think about the high school diploma and kind of graduation requirements. How does that, do you see that tie in with accreditation and, the board's role to confer that diploma?
So I think there's a couple pieces. Obviously, compliance, right? So I think the board's role is to ensure that we are complying with state statutes and state regulations in regards to the state board. But I think also in regards to that individual plans of study and the graduation requirements as we look at those. And the 7th graders, the current 7th graders, will have a new set of graduation requirements as they enter high school. So that's something that the board definitely, your role will be very important as we start to look at what that entails. Anything you would add, Dr. Dennis or Kim?
I would just add that we're in the process of processing through the new requirements for the state, and our intent is to bring recommendations to you this summer.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
The only thing that I would add to that would be the work around Portrait of a Graduate, which I think is influenced by not only your input as a board, but also across the district and stakeholders.
Well, and I think too, just overall support of all of the areas, early childhood, kindergarten readiness, social emotional learning, because all of those are portions of this accreditation process, and not everyone sees it as well as I think Shawnee Mission does.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Really, thank you to the entire team. It's a lot of work, and it gives us that gold star.
Absolutely. That's what
Right?
we're hoping for.
That star of excellence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Where
Thank
are
you,
we?
Ms. Varney.
Thank you.
Dr. Grumman.
Yes. Okay, so we are on the consent agenda items, and that would be 4.1 through 6.5. So unless there is a motion to remove any, I ask for a motion to approve the consent.
Move approval, Goodburn.
Second, Owsley.
All right. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries 6-0. 6.
Sorry.
Okay, so that brings us to action items 7.1. So this is ratification of emergency expenditures with various vendors for remediation of December 2022 freeze damages. Dr. Hubbard.
Yeah, just a reminder, we gave an update in the superintendent's report at the last action meeting, but this, we believe, will conclude the expenditures from the December freeze, and where we executed the board policy to expend without board approval due to an emergency at the time, and so we're hopeful this is the end of that.
All right, do I have a motion?
So moved, Owsley.
All right, second?
Second, Borgman.
Okay, any questions? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. 7.2, approval of revised board policy. So now we're hitting into a series of board policies, and these are all second reads. And so 7.2 is approval of revised board policy IDAB support programs.
The only thing I would add is, again, it is a second read. I did not have any revisions from the first read, and this policy is a KASB recommendation regarding dropout prevention and homebound instruction, and it was really for clarification and ease of use, and to support the fact that special education homebound instruction was just clarified, excuse me. So it aligns with our practices.
Thank you. All right, do I have a motion?
Move approval, Goodburn.
Thank you. Second?
Second,
Or-
Hembry.
Okay, any questions? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, 7.3, approval of revised board policy JBC, students admission to withdrawals from school. Second read.
So policy JBC attaches revised policy removing the language regarding out-of-district students paying tuition, and states the district does not provide transportation for out-of-district students except those individual situations required by law. The district does intend to allow out-of-district students this year. And additionally, this policy, I just want to remind others, will need to be revised for the 24-25 school year, potentially after the current legislative session, depending on where the final details of the open enrollment law land. I would tell you that this has been briefly revised since the first read. It's really more just some cleanup in semantics and making sure that we had removed all references of tuition, because this new policy would provide out-of-district enrollment without any tuition. The only fees would be general fees that all students pay, or fee-based programs like tuition-based pre-K or summer programming or e-school or summer enrichment, things like that, that are typically fee-based for all students.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Owsley.
Great. Second?
Second, Goodburn.
All right. Any questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. 7.4, approval of new board policy IFA classroom displays. Dr. Hubbard.
So again, this is a second read. There are no changes since the first read, but I do want to provide just some clarification here. As noted in the comments in the proposed policy, the Kansas Association of School Boards is recommending that school districts adopt this policy to provide clarity and guidance to school staff regarding appropriate classroom displays. This policy was included in KASB's December 2022 policy updates. I want to clarify that the board is considering adoption of this policy along with other December policy updates from KASB and not in connection with any incident or issue that SMSD is currently dealing with. This policy complies with court decisions regarding public employees' First Amendment rights. In its December 2022 updates, KASB advised school districts that classroom displays constitute government speech under the First Amendment as opposed to private speech, which is protected from censorship. In other words, when a teacher posts materials in their classroom, they're acting pursuant to their official duties as government employees as opposed to exercising their free speech rights as private citizens. Therefore, classroom displays do not have First Amendment protection, but rather are subject to control by the school district to ensure they're appropriate and promote curricular purposes. Given that classroom displays and materials posted within the school are perceived as having the approval of the school district, it's important that we have a policy explaining to all school staff that classroom displays should be tied to our curriculum and district goals and should not promote a political or personal belief. There is no intent to change our current practice, but rather just provide clarity should and when issues arise.
Thank you for that explanation. All right, do I have a motion?
So move, Boyd Nerona.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Borgman.
All right, any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Approval of 7.5, approval of revised board policy JBE, truancy, second read.
So again, second read, no revisions since the first read, but KASB's most recent update to this policy caused some confusion because it listed all exception in the Kansas statute regarding compulsory school attendance, including the exception for special education students. KASB is recommending that the language regarding the exception for special education students from the compulsory attendance statute be deleted because it created confusion regarding whether special education students should be reported when they are truant. So this really just clarifies that Kansas schools are required to report when special education students are not attending school as required by law. So therefore, to avoid any confusion, the KASB December update to policy JBE deletes this reference.
Okay. Do I have a, again, thank you for that. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second. Goodburn.
Okay. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. And the last is 7.6, approval of revised board policy BB, school board legal status. Second read.
So again, second read, no changes since the first read, but I just want to clarify that per state statute, school district review board member boundaries once a year. The voting boundaries are drawn as close to the student attendance boundaries as possible. Based on the state statute, a board member district cannot be greater than 5% above or 5% below the mean population for all 5 districts based on the most recent federal population census. The 2020 census shows a change in population resulting in the west area exceeding the 5% threshold. The recommended changes make each of the 5 districts within this 5% threshold.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Ashley.
Thank you. Second?
Goodburn.
All right, any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. And that brings us to board comments, 8.1. Anybody have any comments or thoughts you'd like to share? Okay. All right. Go ahead, Ms. Borgman.
Well, I just wanted to say it's a big week in Shawnee Mission. This is the beginning of spring sports tryouts. So I know there's a lot of anxiety among a lot of kids, even in my house. So good luck to all those girls soccer players, boys tennis players, baseball, softball, track athletes, and then there's also some big basketball games. I believe Shawnee Mission Northwest and Shawnee Mission East tip off tomorrow at 7 at Shawnee Mission Northwest. So Dr. Sinclair, if you want to join me, I'll buy you some popcorn.
All right.
So anyway, good luck to all the Shawnee Mission athletes this week, because I know it's an exciting one, and wish everybody the best of luck.
Thank you. Yep, Ms. Goodburn?
In addition to BOE member Larry Wynn's passing that Brad acknowledged earlier this year, I wanted to speak to two other former board members passing in recent months. Former board member Jerry Ray passed away in December of '22, and she served on the SMSD BOE representing the South area from August of 2002 to July of 2007. She was appointed to the board in August of 2002 and then elected for one term from 2003 to 2007. She served as the board vice president in 2006-2007. Prior to serving on our board, she was a 3-term representative in the Kansas State House. Prior to that, she served as the chief lobbyist for Johnson County and Overland Park to the state legislature for 14 years. And she also worked as a time as the clerk of the Johnson County Commission, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know her personally, but she served right before Deb Zila joined the board then. That gives you some context. But Jerry Ray's obituary can be found online if you're interested in finding out more information about her. I'm also very sad to announce that Donna Bisfield passed away in late December of 2022. Donna served this board representing the East area right prior to Dr. Sinclair joining the board for 24 years. That's 6 terms. Let that sink in for a minute. 6 terms. She was first elected in 1993 and prevailed in her elections in 1997, 2001, 2005, 2009, and 2013. She served as president of the board from 96 to 98, 2000 to 2002, 2004 to 2005, 2008 to 2009, by my count, 6 terms. She was VP for another 4 terms. Before her service on the board, she was a member of the East Area Advisory Board and area PTAs as well. Donna was a wonderful person and served as a mentor to me as well as others when we were newly elected. In fact, she was the first person I sought out when I actually was just thinking about running for the board 12 years ago. We ended up being great friends, serving and spending many hours together as we did a comprehensive review of all the Shawnee Mission Board policies back in 2014, the entire book of policies. She was a great friend and listener, and with sage advice, the sage advice of a veteran. She was gracious, but also a fierce advocate for public education, and I will miss my friend. And Shawnee Mission School District has lost a great supporter as well. Sorry. Donna's family has been dealing with a lot of other illness in the family and is waiting until this family member is on the mend before writing her obit or scheduling a memorial service. But I did make sure to reach out before I said anything publicly, which they are fine with. But I'm sure I'll be sure to keep you all in the loop as soon as I hear anything. So,
Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. Thank you. Ms. Boyd-Narona.
I just wanted to say that as we come to the close of Black History Month, to encourage us all to continue appreciating, exploring, and educating ourselves on the accomplishments and contributions of African Americans throughout the world and all populations of color that are represented in the Shawnee Mission School District.
Thank you. Ms. Ousley?
I just have one comment, and I even hate to follow Ms. Goodburn and everyone at this, but so our thoughts and prayers are with both families tonight. But I did complete the polar plunge just recently, and I wanted to just share the slogan of the plunge with everyone because I found it really awesome, and it was because, as you all know, the polar plunge is to raise funds to help our athletes who are yes, and sorry, what did you say, Mary? I'm sorry, can't hear you. Anyways, so they had some kids speak beforehand, and they said, you know, their slogan is, may we win, but if we can't win, may we be brave in the attempt. And I thought, wow, that's really, and so I had to get in the water then because they were, you know, you have to show up and do it when the kids are brave and telling you to be brave. But in any event, our special education athletes are so deserving of all of their opportunities, and it was a pleasure to be there on behalf of the board and behalf of them, and I look forward to talking others into joining me next year.
Yep, thank you for plunging. All right. Is that everybody? Did somebody did you? Okay, all right. This concludes our board meeting, and we'll see you all again March 20th, 2023. Thank you, everybody.